So, which one of you do you want to do an intro and an exit? Are you prepared to kind of speak something, or do you want to do that another time?
I would prefer to do it another time.
That's fine.
Just so I can like process it for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I think this is a high stakes thing, but
What I did was I read off my Insight Timer profile. So, are you familiar with Insight Timer?
mm-hmm. You know, Headspace is losing traction quickly.
Major traction to Insight Timer. And I can understand why. I mean, the beauty of Insight Timer is it's free to the user.
Yeah.
And meditation teachers from all over the world can download their meditations for free. It's curated, so they make sure that the meditations are copyrighted and have the proper copyrights, and that they're recorded well.
Yeah.
So I read my profile right off Insight Timer for my intro.
Okay.
Actually, what I was doing is I did a little sales pitch for the Align Mindfulness app that I figured we can kind of cut in the middle.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know who has the best intro? Is the Skinny Confidential podcast, because it's like her and her husband, and so they say how she's like a social media marketing guru and he's a serial entrepreneur, but like somebody else is doing their intro, like it's a different voice.
Oh, okay.
It's super interesting. Not that's helpful in this moment, but
I mean, we could come up with a choreographed intro
yeah,
with the three of us speaking and kind of choreograph it and always be the same.
do you want to hear it really fast? It's like 2 seconds.
Sure.
Just to give you.
Why'd you send me a picture of me?
It's good content.
And he's the following podcast is a Dear Media production. She's a lifestyle blogger extraordinaire. Fantastic. And he's a serial entrepreneur. A very smart cookie. And now Lauren Everts and
Oh, that's funny.
Isn't that good?
for the ride. You're ready for some major realness. Welcome to the Skinny Confidential. Him and her.
So theirs is like very script, like somebody else like did it, but I was like, that's always such a fun little intro that they have. Ha ha.
I like it when podcasts in particular put those kinds of like clever quips in there, like a smart cookie.
Yeah.
Now, we have to focus on the fact that this is a mindfulness. It's more mindfulness oriented. Everyday mindfulness is what we're here talking about and representing. You know, what does that look like in life?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just thinking if we were I was just thinking if we were going to come up with some kind of intro that had to do with mindfulness. Now, I don't want it to feel like, meditation necessarily, because everyday mindfulness is different than meditation. But there's definitely, I don't know.
No, I want to talk about meditation for a second because I have one of those Muse headbands.
Yep.
I haven't used it in 9 months, and every day I know I should.
So, listen to the should.
Because I know that it will be helpful for me, or like at a minimum, it won't hurt. Nobody ever went and said I meditated and it made my life worse.
I'd still listen to
But
the should, because the moment you go into the should, it's your brain telling you what you need to do, or somebody else, like maybe me. Like maybe in your head there's this, well, Tia would be proud of me or whatever if I meditated every day.
You would be proud of me.
But the fact is that you're not. And so then once you kind of go through that process of curiosity as to what is that should, then ask yourself, what's happening that I'm not interested in meditating?
Right.
What else is taking up my time that's more important?
Right. It's interesting because, like, I've started running more.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I run a lot now. I'm not proud of the person I've become, but I do it.
So what does that
and
mean?
that's a meditation now.
Well, yeah,
like,
I mean, running
that's
is.
its own meditation. And so I've found it difficult for me to, like, sit down and, like, kind of find that Zen, like, I'm like Gandhi feeling. You know what I'm talking about? That's what everybody pictures.
Yep.
Like, I'm having a hard time justifying spending 10 minutes doing that when I could spend 10 minutes just going on a mile or mile and a half run. And, like, that's its own, like, sort of form of meditation. But then I look at the headband and I think, well, I invested in this thing, I should probably do it too. And I asked myself yesterday, could I strap the headband to myself as I run and do both?
Isn't that the American way, right? Let's see how many boxes we can check off at the exact same time.
Yeah. But, like, it was also sort of like, and I wonder if it's interesting if I could train myself when I run to actually turn off my whole brain.
Absolutely. You can.
That's fascinating to me. But I'd have to look like a buffoon with a Muse headband, which looks great at Muse. The headbands look great, but just not when you're running. Like, but that's actually been a stressor because I know that I should use the headband. I know I should take 5 minutes and meditate in the morning, but for some reason I haven't done it yet.
So I can't help but want to go back to I have become the person that I'm not proud of.
I love running now. I never
So
said
what?
that I would do
But
that.
what was that? What did that mean?
I
And
d-
what was
I-
that directed at?
I never said that, or I never thought that I would be like the kind of person who exercises and then tells people. Like, I put myself into a box at that point where, like, now everybody who does CrossFit, I'm pretty much like them now. I'm not actually like them, but, like, I'm labeled as the same. It's like,
so
I
in
work
your
out and I
head,
tell
you feel
people.
like that it.
But, like, I run and then it's a great meditation. And so, like, you have the endorphins going and you're like, I just ran a whole lot. Like, I'm in shape. And then you're like, but my head's all clear too. Like, what a huge positive rush that is. You have to tell somebody.
Mm-hmm.
But then you're like, oh, I just got lumped into everybody who's doing pull-ups for 10 hours a day.
Also you.
I can't do that many pull-ups.
Well, the one thing that I was getting at with asking that question was that our words show something. Our words are an indication of something that's happening in our subconscious mind oftentimes. So when you say something casually like that, especially when you're not weighing every word before you speak it, you're just talking, and you say something like what you'd said about not being proud, that's telling you, that's an indication of something that's happening that's worth listening to. It's worth being curious about. That's where oftentimes the good stuff, that's where you learn what the habit is or what the belief is that's no longer serving you. Because there's truth in that. There's a lot of truth in that casual, off-the-cuff statement, especially when you don't check it, right, at your brain before you speak it.
Right.
I also think, too, I was just sitting here and I always take the same instructor on the when I do the Peloton bike, and every single session he ends it with, whatever positive energy you just got from this class, take it and spread it with somebody that you care about and share it with a stranger. So, like, you're telling people that you're working out because it's making you feel so great. You're not telling people that they need to go run miles or anything like that. You're just basically saying, like, this amazing thing is happening to me and I feel like I can conquer the world. Do something for yourself now that makes you feel great. It's like a positive energy that's overflowing.
So why do people then, 'cause, like, what I'm, like, one of the things that I'm, like, thinking about with that is, like, going on a 5-mile run when it's 15 degrees outside and you're running through 4 inches of snow the whole time is not normal.
No, I would literally say you're crazy.
Right.
Right.
That's exactly what I did on Sunday.
But here's the thing. You saying that, in my mind, I'm like, he's crazy, but he's doing something to better himself and make himself feel better. I'm going to go jump on my bike because that makes me feel better. I'm not going to go do what you're doing, but it's like sparking something in another person's mind.
Well, I don't recommend it. It was really cold.
I'm sure it was.
But so why do people who do that, I just did this really good thing, especially with a healthy activity like exercise, like why are they labeled as not relatable?
Because
that's really
think about
what
our
I think is
society.
getting at here.
But like think about our society. Like before you were going on runs and all of that, you were literally the person who thought who you are now is unrelatable.
Right.
But you took one step towards something and now you're looking back and you're like, why am I not relatable now? But it's just like a mindset. Like I know that there were so many people when I was working my corporate job that like hated everything about their lives. And like, yeah, I didn't enjoy my corporate job, but I was working out every day. And it was those 30 minutes or 1 hour that you have directly for yourself. And it just changes your outlook. Some people just don't want to step out of their mental block. So it's easier to say that the person who's bettering themselves is like unrelatable and I can't achieve that. But that's like a cop out. I also did not mean to just go on a rant about people's mindsets.
No, that was exactly it. Because like where I think that like that quippy line that I just said like comes from is like that's just another step of like not being as relatable to the what I'm going to call the commoner, like to like the majority of the population. I don't understand it. Now that I think about it, I don't understand why that's not like put on a pedestal. At least you're like healthy and happy.
Because unfortunately, I feel like we live in a society where there's a small percentage of people who are wanting to like help other people and better their lives. But there's a huge percentage of people who would rather like not put in that 2% that it takes to get going and say that like what you're doing is unattainable. And it's all like a mindset thing. Like imagine if somebody was like, okay, he's going for a 4-mile run in the snow. I just like kind of want to feel better about myself. I'm going to go for a walk outside. That all snowballs on each other when you're doing positive things, but it's easier to stay in a cycle and stay negative.
Interesting.
That's just my 2 cents on that.
So, Evan, I'm just going to remind you that you want your microphone to be closer to your mouth.
Thanks.
Sorry.
That's fine.
So as I'm listening to you guys talk, I'm just chuckling to myself because whichever side of that coin you're on, whether you're on the side of working out and taking those, I don't know, I guess I'm going to call it risks, but using that energy to work out, or whether you're the 2% or whatever, the opposite, the 98% that don't work out, either one is a judgment.
Mm-hmm.
So one is judging the other for whatever reason, and the other's. So the mindfulness practice is about recognizing those judgments. And also having the acceptance part of mindfulness is about accepting that everything just is the way it is. And so we as individuals, we look around our life and we assess what's happening in our world and we notice our thoughts and everything else. And then we ask ourselves, is this authentic to me? Or am I doing this because my mom or my dad or my sister or my friends or the society at large? Is this authentic to me? And you'll know by how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really listen to your thoughts because your thoughts are going to tell you what it's always told you. You listen to what your body is telling you. So if when you're running, you feel good, that's all you need to know. If when you're on the Peloton bike, which, by the way, I want to talk to you about the Peloton because...
honestly, the best thing we ever did.
I'm really interested in...
It's really reasonable, too, because a lot of people, stray away from it. We signed up for, their monthly package, and for 2 people, unlimited classes, all of our, the bike itself. So we wanted to do a monthly one, so it was constantly in our minds we're paying monthly for this, it's a gym membership. And I'm pretty sure for 2 people, unlimited, paying for the bike as well, it's $95, and that's cheaper than
What?
2 gym membership. Yeah, that's why we went ahead and that's why we did it. Because I used to take like unlimited flywheel classes in Atlanta. I had a membership there, and it like pains me to say this, but it was like $200 a month. And so I just remember when I was doing that, Aaron was like, you could own a Peloton bike and you'd be spending half of the money a month. But it's amazing because you can go into live classes, you can do recorded classes. I found my instructor and he's super into mindfulness.
Oh, nice.
He is, yeah. I started following him on Instagram too. His name is like Cody Rigsby, and so his whole thing is you got 20 minutes to yourself, maybe you have 30 minutes, like let go of anything that is happening in your work, in your personal, and like do this for yourself. And then he's all about like take this positive energy, like I was saying earlier, and share it with somebody. Like let's make this world better kind of a thing. But yeah. You'd love it. I'm obsessed. It's so great.
Oh, I have no doubt I would love it.
Oh, yeah.
And I was just looking for a spin class.
Okay.
And I couldn't find one that was going to fit into my schedule.
Yeah.
And I've been assessing the idea of a Peloton bike, but I wanted to make sure I did all of my homework first.
Totally. That's what, I mean, we spent a year looking, like researching the different, because there's different options. And this one made the most sense financially, but also with everything it offers, because once you get the bike and you have their app and you have the membership, they have running classes that you can put your headphones in for. They have weight classes on the app, yoga. Like they have so many things that they offer on the app. So it's not just the bike.
Nice.
Yeah, it's really awesome.
So that was not a sponsored sales pitch.
It wasn't.
That was literally.
No, that's literally just obsessed with it. I've had so many people on Instagram. They're like, "Did you get this bike for free? You talk about how you love it so much." I'm like, "No, it's just so good. If you want to give me something for free, okay, but
That's great.
it's not."
So the point I was getting at is that the mindfulness practice is to simply notice. It's not that even having judgments or whatever's happening is right or wrong. It's just to notice what's happening, and it gets you to your own habits and beliefs. And then hopefully, after you learn more about yourself, you make better choices. So that when you're running, you immerse yourself in the real zone of running. And you don't, if you're going to meditate, but you're doing it because you have to meditate and you're not really engaged in it and you don't feel it physically in the same way as you do running, then meditating is not benefiting you. Traditional meditation. But sometimes the only way for us to figure that out is to listen to ourselves and to understand what's happening. Hi, I'm Annamarie Fernyak, a mindfulness teacher, entrepreneur, and urban revitalizer. In 2019, I published my first meditation with Insight Timer. To listen to these meditations, please download the Insight Timer app from your app store and search Annamarie Fernyak. Thank you so much for listening.
So we just, we moved into a new home.
Yes.
It's been super exciting. Minus the fact that last night we were, almost asleep, and our power went completely off in just the top layer, the top floor. And so Aaron just texted me and he was like, the power went off in the entire house. So we think that there's something wrong with the wiring in our house now.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Not really looking forward to that one. And I was like, well, is the house going to be too cold because our puppy's in there? And he's like, it's fine. Like, the house is warm. It just went off like 20 minutes ago. But it's always something with homes. It's always something.
It really is. It is always something.
That's why it's extremely difficult for me to consider even buying a home instead of renting. Because some of my friends who would like to buy a home instead of paying somebody rent, I think make it like they're like, well, you're paying less for a mortgage than you are for rent, and you have an asset at the end of it. But it feels like with that kind of stuff, a home is just a liability. Sorry, keep going.
Well, you know what? It seems to me I was reading something recently, and they were talking about how right now, and maybe that time has passed, so, my memory doesn't always serve me correctly. This could be a year ago or 2 years ago that I remember this, that it was actually more financially beneficial to rent than to buy.
Really?
And it had to do with the interest rate on mortgages and things like that.
Oh, man.
But I don't know if that's still accurate.
I'm the worst person to talk to because between the two of us, we currently have 3 homes. So
Yeah.
don't ask me that.
If you're, these days you've got that asset can benefit you financially if you do a vacation rental, or if you actually rent it and you cover all your expenses and your mortgage, then you're building an asset and you're not, there's no expense attached. You're making money on it. And at the end of it, you're just going to have an asset. There's a lot to houses. Sometimes I think just living in a condo would be so much easier. At least you own the condo.
Right. And somebody else
But
takes
then you
care of it.
Yeah, you don't have all the maintenance.
Yeah.
But, as with everything, run the numbers. And then run the numbers against your own value system. So sometimes the financial aspect isn't the most important. Sometimes there's the privacy, or there's there being out in the country. There are other things. There are other things that takes priority over the finances.
Yeah. I will say that the other 2 homes are the one's an Airbnb and the other one is fully rented out.
So you're making money on those.
Yeah. And Aaron is just the type of person who, like, in 5 years, if he owned so much commercial real estate and all that stuff, he would be the happiest person in the entire world. So I just, don't really mess with it. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
here we
Well,
are.
there's a lot of people that I know that that's how they made their money. It's just one house after another. They just continually buy houses and rent them out and buy houses and rent them out.
I went to a parking meeting for the Short North last year, and I ended up at a table, and every single person there, they had owned multiple properties in the Short North. They bought them 30 years ago or something.
When the property values were so low.
The amount of money these people are making from having, I think the one had 3 homes, but the average one person just had 1 house. I was blown away.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And again, in the mindfulness practice, it goes back to checking everything at your values, making sure that that's something you actually want to do.
Right.
I mean, do you want to manage properties?
100% no. It's not.
Aaron does, though, right?
Oh,
you kind of said
yes.
that. Yes. So then that's a direction to go. If you're doing anything in your life just for financial gain, it's just not going to bring you joy.
Nope.
It has to have some other higher purpose.
I love that you said that so much because people will send me messages on Instagram asking why should they start a blog, or that they want to start a blog. Why did you do it? Blah, blah, blah. Will I make money off of it? And I always stop and I'm like, do it because you want to do it. Do it because you want to help people. Don't do it because you think that you're going to get a paycheck at the end of it, because honey, you're not going to get one for a while. So you better be enjoying what you're doing. Fully.
Exactly. And I've been doing this business mindfulness for 10 years or so. I've been doing it professionally for 4 years. And just this morning I looked in the mirror and I thought, why am I doing this? Really?
Oh, wow.
What is the purpose of this? Am I doing it for myself as an ego thing, right? Or am I doing it because I feel like it's affecting people in a positive way? What is my purpose? And I think that's an important conversation for each of us to have all the time, constantly checking, what are my motives for this? Because this business, this podcasting, the social media business could become just a huge ego boost.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm always asking myself, am I doing this just because I really like seeing my face, my mug and hearing my voice? Or am I doing it because it really is part of what my purpose is, to spread this word to the world around me?
Yeah. It's very obvious for people who are following along they can tell really fast what your motives are, even if you can't or you haven't figured out what they are yet, or you haven't had that conversation with yourself. People pick up on that super, super fast. So, like, there's people I followed on Instagram and their accounts blow up, and then 2 months down the road, I'm like, I have to unfollow you because you're not providing any value anymore. You're just like showing your face because
You like to see your face?
Because you like to see your face. I don't know. So, I mean, it gets really obvious really fast.
Yeah. And I'm always checking that and asking myself those questions. And I can't say that I really know the answer. The only thing I do know for sure is that when I'm guiding or leading meditations, like, I feel it. Like, I feel engaged in that, and I feel connected to just this larger bit of energy. And I'm hoping, so it's interesting that we're even having this conversation, because Evan and I kind of had this conversation last week 2 weeks ago when we recorded the last podcast, which was, what do we want the point of this podcast to be? And it was that we want it to be authentic.
Right.
We want it to share something that's very real to us. And we want, through this podcast, through I guess these exploratory conversations, to find the voice of the podcast.
Right. Can I ask both of you guys a question?
Sure.
Okay. So what do you feel authentic means? Like, what is authentic to you?
As in define authentic?
Yeah, like define authentic.
I know that's a big question, and I've seen that on Instagram quite a bit. Like, what does authentic mean? Really, it's being true to your own values, in my opinion. It's being true to your own values. And I think for a lot of people, this whole idea of values, maybe they've never even heard that phrase, like, true to your values. What does that mean? I think a lot of people, or I know just from conversations, a lot of people perceive values as ethics and morals, and it's not at all. Values are something that are inherent to you. And you don't find your values by looking at a sheet of values and saying, oh, that's mine, that's mine, that's mine. Because our tendency then is to choose the values that we think we should have based on all those shoulds, the kind of person we should be. You really find your values. You discover your values through how you live your life. Those things that bring you joy, those are the things that are most important to you. Those things that you're willing to fight for, those are the things that are most important to you. So if you kind of substitute the phrase, what are my values for, what is most important to me in my life, those things that are the most important to you are the same as your values.
I love that.
So if you're living authentically, you're living within that value system. And I often tell my clients, if they're really struggling against something in their life, it's likely that they have two very important values that are opposing each other.
Oh.
And so no matter what decision they're making, they're going to have to honor one value and dishonor another. And so the power comes in recognizing those two values, the one that you would have to honor and the one you'd have to dishonor, and then making a conscious choice. So when somebody says, when somebody feels like they're victimized, or they say they have no choice, the chance is that they're feeling victimized by these two very important values of theirs, and they have to choose between one of them.
I honestly have never realized that. That's so, wow. That's so accurate.
So a lot of people, when they're in a situation, they'll do the pros and cons.
Right.
It doesn't quite get you there.
Right.
The question to ask yourself is, what's important to me about making this choice, which would be one of your values, and what's important to me about making this choice? And if there's more than two choices, what's important to me about making this choice? And then really going through that in your head about what are all the things that are important to you about that. What are all the things that make you angry or bring you joy about those two things? And that helps you to figure out what your values are. And then you really just have to decide on one or the other. And when you do it through choice rather than through not having a choice, it's a powerful decision. It empowers you as a person.
Right.
Yeah, I would say the only thing I'm going to add to that, I think it's being true to your values as they exist today. And so I think that authenticity is, it's a verb, and it like continually happens because people's values do change. That likes and dislikes, and how does that relate to a particular trigger or particular aspect of your life that might be conflicting, that continually changes, especially as life progresses. And so I think the only thing that I would add to that is that authenticity can change, and it can change 180 degrees if you need it to. It's just as your values develop, staying true to that and not necessarily fighting for one value because it's the value that you used to have, instead of maybe discovering what the new value might be because of whatever new situation that you find yourself in. And I think that's where I see a lot of inauthenticity is from people not knowing their North Star, or not knowing where they want to go, or being comfortable with the way things were, and now they become inauthentic, not because they've always been inauthentic, but because maybe their value system changed and they haven't taken the time to come and accept that.
So let me give you an example, because I think the idea of values is very confusing. When I was working with a personal coach, just in casual conversation, I was talking about how I was so frustrated with this driver who was in front of me that was slowing me down, which was why I was late to the coaching call. Everything is fodder for coaching conversation, right? Even just a casual off the cuff. And she said, well, what's important to you about driving without this person driving slow? Because I was so angry about it. And after we talked through it, she said, you know what, it sounds to me like a very important value of yours is freedom. I was like, oh my God. You know when you find the right word, because you feel it. Like, it's like getting goosebumps on your arms, right? I said, oh my God, that's so it. Everything, when I look back on my life, almost all the choices I make are based on freedom. I need to have my freedom. And you, Evan, know this about me, right? I do not like to be tied down in any way. I don't like to be told what to do. Freedom is a very important value of mine. And so when I go on a family vacation, I'm going to use this as an example because this is a great example for when I make a choice against freedom. When I go on a family vacation, I have to choose between joy with my family and freedom. And it's a very conscious choice. So there's a part of me that whenever I step into that vacation mode with family, that I shed that value of freedom. I just let it go, so that I can enjoy the time with my family. I can let them choose what restaurants they want to go to. Listen to me, I say let. But, I cannot get engaged in the choices in food, the choices in activities, the times that people get up, what coffee they put in the coffee maker, all those things that are really important to me. The fact that one of my sisters drives like 5 miles an hour under the speed limit. So these are the things. These are the things that it's a conscious choice to let that go. So the reason I'm bringing this up, Evan, is because values are something that are inherent to you. They're not something that changes. It's the uncovering of values that gets deeper and deeper as we get older.
Interesting.
So the younger you are, when you begin to think about choices in terms of values, the more authentic you will be at a younger age, if that makes sense. But your actual values are inherent to you. You were born with them. So if you have you have 2 sisters, Evan. Mm-hmm. So you probably, because you're the oldest, you have seen certain character traits about your sisters that were inherent to them as children. Those are directly tied to their values. So I don't want to disagree with what you said. But the term values was probably not correct.
Mm-hmm.
There's probably another term, because yes, I agree, people evolve, and then what you would classify as authentic may change. But it doesn't change because their values have changed. It's changed because their understanding of their values has changed.
Oh. Do you mind if we unpack something about what you just said
Sure.
related to vacations?
Uh-oh.
So one of the things, like, in terms of people perceiving your authenticity,
Mm-hmm.
because I think, like, if you're in business or you're selling something or you're even in a conversation with somebody where you're in partnership together or anything like that, people sense authentic versus inauthentic. Like, I'm getting played or I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
But inconsistency, like with your values, makes people seem inauthentic when in reality it might be an internal thing for you. So if you were on a vacation, you did not totally shed freedom, because what I know about you being on family vacations is you do not make any decisions.
I don't.
You make zero. But if you at one time valued your freedom over the joy with your family, would the perception be, or could the perception be, that you were being inauthentic for part of the time?
Yes.
And so now that's causing massive confusion.
Right.
Is it like you have to pick a team and play?
Well, so if I'm hearing you correctly, your choice of freedom, so now that I'm older, my choice of freedom, my choice of family over freedom is conscious. When I was younger, my choice would have been freedom over family because of where I was in my life. But the values didn't change. It's my choice within those values that changed.
That's so interesting. Yeah.
And the empowering aspect of it is that you are consciously choosing one over the other, which keeps you from having that feeling of being victimized, of having no choice. So often when I'm talking to people and they're in a situation, they'll say, I had no choice but to do this. And I say, you always have a choice. If you're not being bound and gagged, like somebody is physically controlling your body, you have a choice. It's recognizing what your values are that has caused you to make that choice. And then even though that choice you may feel victimized by it, once you choose it consciously, it becomes an empowered choice. And who you are within that decision is totally different. Like the energy, the possibility, the opportunity within that choice is totally different. My last workshop that we did, it was a fall retreat with women. It was the first time I'd ever brought a values conversation into the mindfulness practice. And they were all just like you guys are. They were just like silent. It takes a while to really understand, I think, the power in values.
Mm-hmm.
And my company, Mind, Body, Align, we operate solely on core values. It's a little bit different when it's a corporate organization, right? So you do look at a sheet or decide based on what's important, well, to me as the founder, what the values are. And not everybody within the organization is necessarily going to share those values in the same way that I do. But as an organization, we check everything we do against those values. And we make sure that it's within the parameters of those values, that the choices we're making honor all those values. And if it doesn't honor a value, we know exactly why it doesn't. Like we've made a conscious choice.
I think it's interesting because that's how like Carter's operated too. And so like I understand that from the corporate standpoint, because like those are set in stone. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but as a person who's constantly trying to not evolve, but you know, grow and learn and better yourselves, it's, I don't know, it's such a complicated topic. Maybe it's not that complicated and I'm making it more complicated in my head, but it's just interesting that like your values aren't changing the way that you're seeing them. It's changing as you're growing,
Mm-hmm.
and how that can translate to other people. It's just so, there's so many layers.
Mm-hmm. It's
Yeah.
It's definitely an evolution of person.
Yeah.
And part of it is just being willing to be in the conversation and to be willing to not be right about it. I put right in quotes because our mind is constantly getting involved.
Right.
And whenever our mind gets involved, it's inserting habits and beliefs, and it's inserting shoulds and coulds and wouldas, and the mindfulness practice is to just continue listening to that. And so that's part of the authentic evolution, is being willing to let it grow and evolve. And as you said, sometimes that's making a 300 or 180 degree turn and just being okay with that. At our last podcast, Evan was talking about how sometimes he'll feel definite about something and he'll express it. But if somebody asks questions and is willing to have dialogue about it and gives him another better way to perceive it, he'll change his mind, which then people might perceive him as being, what was the word you used? Do you remember?
People perceive me as being inauthentic when that happens.
Inauthentic.
It's like I can't find something and stick to it.
Right.
The alternative would be that I never make a decision and I look wishy-washy. And so it's like, well, maybe this is the right thing, but I don't actually have all the information, and so I'm open to new ideas. It's not how I operate. I operate as in, I'm going to go full steam into the information that I have right now. As soon as I have better information to change my course, I will do so immediately. But in that definitism, and then change, and now new definitism, I look inauthentic.
So what's important to you about just driving forward, even though you don't have all the information? What's important to you
I'm going
about
to
that?
discover more. I never have all the information.
Right. So
the
what's
more
important about that, though?
I value action more than I value data points, or I value research.
So when you talk about moving forward and basically taking those risks, what's important to you about that?
We've created an environment where something new can happen, or something that we don't expect can happen. And while I will act first to a fault, as long as the actions that my team and I are taking stay true to our values, I'm perfectly happy to be wrong and to deal with the consequences.
So if you were to describe 3 words that described that, 3 single words that describe the paragraph you just said, the first word I heard was discovery. The second word I heard was action.
Mm-hmm.
What would be the third word?
Trust.
Trust. So if we were in the coaching situation, I would put those 3 words down as 3 potential values of yours. Being a discoverer, discovering new things, taking action, and trusting that it's going to work out exactly as it is supposed to.
Yes.
So that's exactly what I mean by how you mine for values. When you're mining for values, you look at the things that are most important to you in any conversation and you ask yourself, what's important about this to me? No one word is ever going to quite get you there. Like some people will say, well, it's appreciation. Well, yes, appreciation is a part of it. So I always just break it down into 3 words. And those 3 words point you to someplace. They give you a fuller picture or perspective of what that value is.
I have a question. Has somebody like told you that seems inauthentic, or is that how you're perceiving it?
I've gotten that feedback several times.
Interesting.
Yeah. From people, admittedly, who will go into analysis paralysis to a fault.
Gotcha.
And they will say that. So they're very active in saying,
Right.
I analyze almost to a point where I can't take action sometimes because everything gets too complex.
Right. Because I'm just thinking, I also feel like it depends on the person that you're having the conversation with. Because when you and I have conversations, I feel like what starts as topic A evolves into like D or something. And it's not because I'm thinking that you've changed your mind and it's like not an authentic thought anymore. It's just like it's growing and it's changing and we're getting more information. So it's just interesting. So that's why I was just wondering.
Well, I think one of the things about how you and I operate is we operate under a yes and
Right.
assumption. And with quite a few of the people that I've received that feedback from, what ends up happening is they get caught up in the thing that I get almost the most annoyed by out of everything, which is, well, we're sort of in this butterfly effect situation. Ultimately, we don't know what's going to happen, but the chances are it's not going to be good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I distance myself from those people very quickly because that just doesn't. It's not how my brain operates.
Mm-hmm.
But I think with you also will take an idea and then help develop it all the way to the point where we do end up at point D or point E. And I think at least when working with me, I never have a good idea if I come up with it on my own.
Right.
But when you and I work together, that's when we come up with something that has real value.
So it kind of is the people that you're discussing stuff with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you will take something almost definitively and say, yes, this is a thing that we can do, and let's move forward. You do a little bit more research than I do, which is like, I don't even know the right Google search. And so we balance each other that way.
Right. Okay. Interesting.
So you also weren't here for a conversation last week about StrengthsFinders 2.0. Have you ever taken your StrengthsFinders test?
I haven't taken that one in particular, but I have taken some like personality tests in the past.
I'm thinking it would be really interesting if you took that StrengthsFinders test. So you have to buy the book, StrengthsFinders 2.0, and then in the back of the book there is a passcode. You go onto the website, you take the test, and it'll give you your top 5 strengths.
Is it on Amazon, the book?
I'm sure.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Buy it
Or
now.
you can buy it at Main Street Books here in Mansfield.
Okay.
Actually, right over here on 4th Street. Yeah. And that might be a really fun conversation because it sounds to me like you have 2 very complementary strengths.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just that strengths are going to be the key. It's also going to be kind of personality style.
Right.
So you're both also very open-minded. And you're more interested in like what you can create together
Right.
than what you create as an individual. And I mean, I'm not necessarily saying that this socialist kind of attitude is the right way to be in the world. I mean, I think that people that say I'm doing it for you and I'm only doing it for you are lying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, for sure.
So when I say that you're working strongly as a collective and that's very important to you, there's also the I involved.
Mm-hmm.
I also hate that phrase, there's no I in we. I mean,
Right.
give that up. There is an I in we, right? In my opinion. I mean, there's the we and there's the I.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to take into consideration your own values and what's important to you as an individual and then bring that to the collective.
Yeah.
So I don't know where I was going with this. Oh, it'd be really interesting for us, the 3 of us, to do the StrengthsFinders and talk about it. We could maybe even get Cindy Biggs here. She's my Strengths Finders coach, and she could,
Oh, that'd be really cool.
Oh, that'd be cool.
she could walk us through some of that, which would be really fascinating.
Yeah. That would be. I was just sitting here thinking about all the people who I've ever like worked well with throughout my 6 full years of working. I don't even know how long it's been at this point. But it's always people that are like non-judgmental sounding boards and who I like highly respect.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not having to like actually come into the conversation motivating them, but we leave the conversation feeling like we are conquering the world. Like, I don't know what that personality trait is, but it's a gold one.
It is a gold one.
Yeah.
You know, it's a rare person that can be in a part of that shared conversation and that shared experience, and it can mentor somebody without necessarily giving advice. You know, they're mentoring you through actions, through conversation, through clarifying questions.
I literally just posted about that on Instagram last week.
Yeah.
I said that's what our relationship has been. It's like we get on a phone call and he knows like the correct questions to ask. And I'm like, boom. Gave him a nice little shout out. It was so nice.
Is this your coach?
It was nice.
No, this was to Evan.
This was me?
Yeah.
It was so nice of her.
It's very true. You are really good at asking clarifying questions and just, you know, helping somebody to process information in a way that makes things clear.
Because I'll come into a conversation and be like, blah, 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 this is what we need to do, blah, blah, blah. And then it's nice to have somebody who's like, okay, but answer this one and answer this one. And if I'm still like, you know, a psycho person after it, then we're on to something.
If you haven't beaten each other up or...
Yeah. We've actually been so much nicer to each other recently. I was just thinking about that the other day.
Since you got back from vacation.
Could it be since that conversation about how, the very first podcast, remember? There was a conversation about how Evan makes you nervous.
Yeah. Because I always viewed him as like a loose cannon. I just never knew what was going to happen.
I wonder if just speaking it
maybe
like released it.
Maybe. That's so true. I never even thought about that.
Sometimes I am a loose cannon.
Yeah, but now I see it in more of like a productive way. It's not going to completely terrify me.
How is that productive? Like every once in a while you hit the right target?
Yeah, I don't know. Or maybe I'm just kind of like, this is Evan. Like I've just accepted you for you. Like when you send me just random emojis out of nowhere and I don't, it means nothing. I'm just like, this is Evan.
Yes.
I am not looking for an answer here.
No. Last night I sent her a bunch of random emojis.
Ones I didn't even know existed.
Well, that's why I was sending them, because I was trying to find any emojis that I would find interesting for potential Instagram captions or just funny memes. And I didn't find any that I really liked. And so we're going to have to start using Snapchat cuts.
I literally asked him, are you drunk? Because there was so many coming through and none of it made any sense.
She's right.
And I was like, are you drunk? And he said, no, I wish. And then he just kept sending emojis and I just never responded. I just left it. I just let it be what it was.
Yes, just let it be.
Yeah.
I didn't find any that I liked, though. If you were like, oh, that's an interesting emoji, then I'd be like, oh, interesting. But
I know. I let you work it through on your own system.
There were a lot that I didn't know existed.
I'm honestly.
Rock climbing?
Yeah.
What?
I'm trying to pull it up now because you were sending ones that were just like.
Thankfully, they have ropes. They're not doing that crazy free climbing stuff.
You sent a dragon?
That was a great movie, wasn't it?
It was a great movie.
Yeah.
I think about it a lot.
Yeah, I do too. You know, there was something that he said that was so powerful to me that it keeps coming back in my head, which was when he was climbing, he has to observe the fear. He has to set the fear outside of himself.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh my God, that's powerful. That is the mindfulness practice. To be in that zone where you're observing what's happening and you're just accepting it as it is. You're not letting it run you.
Right.
You're just letting it be an emotion that's existing. And the way he phrased it, I just have to set the fear outside myself. Oh my God, that's so cool. Of course, he's at 2,000 feet above the ground.
Yeah.
And he's clinging to the side of him. You know, he's clinging to a rock.
For those of you who haven't seen the movie, it's a documentary about the first guy to free climb, which means climb without any ropes or any safety net or anything like that. If you fall, you die. El Cap in Yosemite. He just did it in like 2017.
It's such a great movie.
What's it on? What's it called?
It was a National Geographic
Okay.
movie. It was in theaters when we saw it.
Okay.
It's called what? Free
Climb.
Free Climb. It's
Also not a
worth it.
paid sponsor.
Yeah,
It
not
was
a
just
paid.
really good.
It really.
I have got to see that.
I was on the edge of my seat the whole time, and the palms of my hands were sweating. I mean, I was just so
Oh, my
anxious for
word.
him because you don't really
Right.
know if I suppose you do know he's going to survive, but you don't.
You
I mean,
don't really know.
You don't really know if he's going to survive. And
Right.
I mean, I didn't because I don't know him. I didn't know him at the time. Of course, now since I watched the movie, I Googled him and I've watched all of his videos.
Yeah.
Because he's just a fascinating guy. He's very introspective. And I suppose when
Interesting.
you're spending hours on a rock, you know, focused on survival,
Yeah.
you would be introspective.
One of the things that I think about a lot, and I haven't sorted through why I think about it yet, but when he was like talking to his girlfriend and she was trying to convince him not to do it, he referred to falling and dying as perishing.
Interesting. I didn't even that.
And that he said, if I perish. And I thought, what an acceptance of like what you're about to do. At the same time, I don't know what that means yet. Like,
Interesting.
you really have to get to a different mental place to think about that experience purely in like a biological capacity,
Mm-hmm.
especially speaking to your romantic partner at the time.
Right.
It was really a good
Wow.
movie. Yeah.
Now I'm going to be thinking about that all day.
And you can watch some of his videos on YouTube
Okay.
that are very interesting, and it will give you some insight into his personality.
Yeah.
Just an interesting person.
It reminded me of, I was listening to this podcast over Christmas, and there's actually like a workshop, and you have to apply to be accepted. They only take 50 people, but I don't remember the name of it, but they were talking about it, and you are hiking like one of the days, or it's like 2 of the days. Your entire task for the day is to hike up and down this hill until you reach the equivalent of hiking, I don't know, it's like they pick like a mountain or something like that. And that's just like what you do for 2 days. And it's this whole business workshop. It's very interesting.
Just
It's
go,
like-
just go walk the Camino. Really, I mean, that's something we should do. I mean, maybe we could do a workshop or a retreat where we guide a long walk on the Camino, 7 days or something. But
Holy smokes.
whenever, at least my own experience walking the Camino, when your only task for the day is to wake up, eat, and walk,
Mm-hmm.
eat, walk, eat, sleep, it changes the stuff that's happening in your head.
Yeah. I believe it.
It was fascinating.
This might come as a surprise, but I'm not really like an outdoorsy kind of girl. So so what you just said, I think, would really change me as a person.
And it's not for everybody. Everybody challenges themselves in different
Yeah.
ways. So what do you think would be a major challenge for you? Something that would push you really far outside your comfort zone?
Doing what you just said, because that isn't something that I would ever do. Doing that, and then I think half of the problem with my personality, because I was just sitting here and I was like, well, that would probably make me uncomfortable for like a day, but then I probably would be super into it, and I'd be like, everyone needs to do this. So I'm just trying to think of what makes me uncomfortable. Not a whole lot.
So it's funny, as I was asking you the question, what I was picturing in my head was a little teeny cabin, like a one-person cabin on the beach.
Already having anxiety.
On the beach?
By myself?
Yes.
I'm having major anxiety. That's what it is. That pushes me on my car. I don't like being alone. I hate being alone. I can't even stay in our own house by myself. I hate it.
Is
So
that why you
there
got a dog?
Oh, well, I got a dog for many reasons. They're cute. They're a great companion. Yeah, no, that is part of the reason, because Aaron travels for work, and like sometimes he has to be gone for like a night or something, and I kid you not, when he first started doing that, I didn't sleep. I was up the entire night. So yeah, I guess that makes me really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I have a very unrealistic fear that somebody is breaking into my home, or that somebody is going to kidnap me, and I understand I'm not a kid, so that doesn't really fully make sense, but I still have that major fear. I have no idea what it is.
Mm-hmm.
No idea. So yeah, there we go. Phew, we found it.
So would you feel comfortable walking the Camino if Aaron were with you?
Yeah.
Then it would be fine.
Mhm.
But if you did it alone?
Mm-mm.
Absolutely not.
So I walked it with my husband.
Okay.
And I have to admit, I had a lot of fear around walking it by myself, which is
Yeah.
why I was either going to bring a friend or Carl was going to come with me. But then when I started walking, so much of it, even though you're walking with somebody else there,
Mhm.
you're walking by yourself
Right.
because the trails are often narrow. And so there's one person in front of the other.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And I was always the one in front because my husband hikes faster than I do. So he would hike behind me because he didn't want to get too far ahead of me.
Oh, that makes sense.
But I also talked to a lot of people. A close friend of mine, Ruthie, who lives here in Mansfield, also hiked the Camino with a girlfriend, and they just hiked at different paces. So they would meet up at predetermined stopping points in different cities, and they would have lunch together or they'd have dinner together, and they spent the night in the same hostels.
Okay.
But they were essentially walking by themselves.
Interesting.
So there's all different ways that you can do something like that. What was that sound?
Oh, no.
It
Something.
Wasn't it
Sounded like a
wasn't that
grenade went off.
door. I'm mentally making a note of all these little things to tell
Yeah.
Carl what the different, challenges to podcasting in this space.
That is super interesting, though. I wonder what my fear from being alone it truly comes from. It's once it gets dark. I'm fine being alone during the day,
Mm-hmm.
but once that sun sets, you better believe I'm not going to be by myself.
Mm-hmm. I have a fear of the dark. And it's something I work through all the time. My husband and I live on a farm.
Right.
We used to have 2 German Shepherds,
Oh, so cute.
which, believe it or not, were very much a comfort, especially when I was by myself. And yet my husband would still encourage us to go walking in the summer after dark, which there's a whole section, our drive is about a mile long. There's a whole section that is in a dark woods. And walking through those woods, even with Carl and the 2 dogs, would scare me out of my mind.
Yeah, same.
And it was this mental conversation in my head that was, you're going to be okay, 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 constantly over and over and over again as I was walking through those dark areas.
Yeah. Mm.
And even thinking about it, I can
Yeah, I'm honestly a little tingling over here right now. I'm I don't think I could. I don't know if it's because there's so many crazy people in the world, but half of the reason why I'm so scared of the dark and why I wouldn't do that outside is because the entire time I would be thinking somebody's in these woods and they're about to jump out and kill me.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a rational thought. I understand that. But, it happens.
Oh, that's my chime.
And we ended on that thought. Careful of the woods, everyone.
I always tell myself when we're walking the poem, I think it's Robert Frost. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, and I have promises to keep. And miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. And I can't remember the rest of the poem. But I often tell myself that over and over again.
Does it help?
It does, actually. It focuses my mind.
I don't know.
So who wants to say goodbye? Do we all want to say goodbye? Evan's shaking his head no.
Bye, everyone.
Have a great day.
Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great day.
Oh,
I was wondering where the chime came from.
I
It's
put
like-
the alarm on my phone so we wouldn't forget.
I thought you put it in the computer or something, and it was only going through our headphones. I was like, how did she do that? 3 weeks ago, we were figuring out what the right slot is for the USB stick, and now we're putting
Now we're
pre-programmed chimes only into the headphones.
thanks again for joining us today. If you'd like to connect with us on social media, you can find Annamarie at Mindfully Annamarie. You can find myself at Emily VDW, and you can find Evan at _Evan Ryan. We'll talk to you next week.